Geek. Talking baseball every week. Because they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, the Is It Over? Episode. Wednesday, we had a Patreon episode where we were pretty sure it was over.
Yeah.
We said that was the fun part.
Well, not that much as well.
And the truth is things have gone
sort of Cleveland's way. I guess,
not really.
As much as it
we lost one on Wednesday, but then Cleveland lost yesterday.
Yeah.
It still feels like, I mean, all the same stuff applies. I know we shouldn't, but shouldn't.
It's over.
I think it's pretty much over.
I might as well lean into it because the title of my article on Wednesday morning or Wednesday night
was
"It's Over." Why the Twins can stop focusing on the Guardians and start focusing on the playoffs or something like that. My editor chose the headline, but
I am John Bonus of Twins Daily. With me, Aaron Gleeman of Gleeman of the Athletic of Gleeman and the Geek.
Aaron Gleeman of Gleeman
also
and the Geek.
Gleeman and the
Why
Geek.
not? Yeah, that's very accurate. Who else would it be of Gleeman and the Geek? My mom. We recorded. First of all, if you're listening to this and you enjoy the show, I know it's off to a rousing start. This episode, it's radio gold right now.
Yeah.
But we're doing. We published this on a Friday.
Right. And it's free. We're happy to do it.
Yeah.
We've been doing it for 12 years.
Yes, we're very happy. Listen, but we would be even happier, and I think you would be even happier.
Yes.
That might be a stretch. If we do Monday and Wednesday morning episodes as well, but we do those on a website or a platform called Patreon, Patreon, and it's patreon.com/Gleeman. And the way that works is those are commercial free. Right. Sometimes like more deep dive stuff, sometimes interviews or guests, and then sometimes we do mailbags. Sometimes it's just
emergency.
Our way to
podcast,
react to
right?
news or specific games and not have to wait a week between episodes. And the way that works is if you sign up, you get them delivered right to you as soon as we're done recording them, just like you would. You can plug it into Spotify or Apple or however you get your podcast. And the only difference is there's no sponsors, so there's no ads, and you get charged $1 when they come out. And if we don't put a new one out for 3 days or a week, you don't get charged anything.
Entire off season,
right? And you get access to the entire archive for free. So it seems like a great time for the last 3 weeks of the regular season and the fill in the blank weeks of the playoffs or days of the playoffs.
Yes.
It would seem like a prime time to join Patreon.com/Gleeman.
It was a fun week to be on that this week because we recapped the Rangers series on Monday, which was a fun series, and then we recapped the first two games of the Cleveland series, which were really fun.
We recorded our last Patreon episode on Wednesday morning between games 2 and 3. And it was especially weird because we finished recording that at 10:30, 11 o'clock.
Yeah, right.
And their first pitch was at 12:10 our time.
Right.
So it was like, well, it's mostly over. And if in an hour from now, by the time you guys listen to this, most people don't listen to it in the first 8 minutes, although we're always shocked that it's like 2,000 downloads in like 10 minutes. Yes. But I was like, well, if they win the third game, it's like actually over. Yes. They didn't win the third game. They could have. It
also gave people something to listen to during the rain delay.
That's true. Yeah, that was a very strange game.
A very odd game.
It had a very.
Did you expect the pitchers to come back out?
No, but
I didn't either.
Dan said that because Dan was there. Dan Hayes of the Athletic, best known for his handsome partner
and his inability to catch baseballs.
You said it. I didn't. It's a little sensitive about that. He just sits there now and goes, "I just need one more. I just need a chance."
I was giving you a hard time last night about that.
Oh, you saw each other last night? Is that?
No, I did not see each other.
Text.
We were texting each other. Yeah, I sent him a video. There's a video of a minor league announcer catching a foul ball and praising himself and announcing him catching the foul ball.
Well, now Dan has like PTSD from it, which is anytime a foul ball gets hit into the press box, and the press box is pretty large. Like it fits like 100 people. Like there's a front row that's probably, 40 seats. And so a lot of the balls are nowhere near me and Dan on one side, and he has no chance in them. But anytime a ball gets hit into the press box or even like in front of the press box, he will immediately poke his head out the window and look to the left where the television booth is because he's so now afraid of Dick Bramer making fun of him for dropping foul balls. But anyway, on Wednesday's show, we were kind of stuck in the middle of, well, it's pretty much over. It could in 3 hours be over. Now it wasn't because that game reminded me a lot of the first half where they just could not punch through a couple of runs when they needed it.
It also because
they pitched pretty well, all things considered.
Here's what I thought about it. I thought that's the team we thought Cleveland was going to be.
Right.
I mean, what we thought Cleveland was going to be this year. That was the 90 win version of the Cleveland team that we're seeing right now.
Right. It's what we saw last year, which is they catch everything.
Yeah, they catch everything. They've got shutdown pitching both in the front and the bullpen,
and they scratch out enough offense.
A couple. Yes, exactly right. Like that's what we thought Cleveland was going to be. We finally saw it in the last game of the Cleveland series, and it's not going to do them any good. It was too little, too late.
Right. I mean, that it is scary that type of like stylistically type of team, which is high contact offense, which means high variance offense. And it means you need to string together hits.
Right.
When it works, it looks beautiful.
Yes.
Nothing looks more beautiful than a bunch of balls in play and singles and doubles. And they didn't score like a billion runs or anything. They barely scored anything. But you score enough to then hand it over to the bullpen if you get good starting pitching. And then if the bullpen is just shut down, well, when it's going well, that can seem like such an easy, smooth, straightforward approach, which it was last year for them. But when it's going poorly, they just score 2 runs, and the bullpen gives up 2 runs. And so I watched them last night on the West Coast, the start of what I'm assuming is a 4-game series,
it is a 4-game series.
In Anaheim.
Yep.
And the Twins also play the Angels relatively soon.
Right,
and so the Angels are a mess. Shohei Ohtani is not playing at the moment. Trout's out.
Which also meant Cleveland had to fly 4 hours after that rain-delayed game yesterday over to California for the last night's game.
But they had the lead 2-1, and it looked like another example of that type of game where they scratch together 2 or 3 runs and then they just shut it down. And the Angels are just a mess, and yet they load the bases against Class A, they tie it up, and then it bloops in a single, and Cleveland gets walked off, and so that undoes half of the positive that Cleveland got from beating the Twins in the finale. Or if you want to view
1/3,
well, sort of. I mean, it's literally half.
They still have the tiebreaker now,
right? Or I was just about to say, or you can just look at it as that undid the tiebreaker.
Yeah,
that game. There's the half game that the tiebreaker sort of represents. Sure. But either way, we broke this down more on the Patreon, and we won't get back into the nitty gritty of it. But they're roughly 98-99% to win the division. It's a combination of factors. A, they're just up 6.5 games with only 22, or for Cleveland, 21 to play. B, there are no more head-to-head matchups, which makes it even more difficult for Cleveland to make up the ground because they can't control any aspect of their own destiny there. And then C, Cleveland's schedule is not that tough anymore. Like, they got through the difficult part of their schedule, like the truly difficult, but it's like league average now. I think 12 out of their last 21 are against winning teams. But the Twins only have 6 of their last 22 against winning teams, and then finish with Anaheim, who we just said is a husk of a team, Oakland, and Colorado, which is as easy a final 9 games as you can finish with. And so for all those reasons, I'm not someone who typically tries to jump the gun on, it's over. There's no point in that. It's not like a point of pride to be the first one to declare it over or anything like that.
Magic number is 16.
Yes, I got to use my Frank Viola picture last night to post the magic number. I was worried about that.
Good.
I would say you can start clearing October 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Certainly the 3rd and the 4th from your schedules. That's when the first round of the playoffs would be. Those will be at Target Field. We don't know the times, but I'm guessing day games. We'll see. Depends on the matchup a little bit. They took 2 of 3 in Texas, 2 of 3 in Cleveland.
Texas is
a mess too. And that was the end. The last Cleveland game.
Texas is now out of it. They're actually out of the postseason right now. They went from a first round bye to out of the postseason right now in 3 weeks.
In part because they went 2-5 against the Twins.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. They just stopped hitting. Now they're injured. But so the last Cleveland game Wednesday, was the 15th of 15. Where we kind of said this is the last gauntlet that the Twins have to get through. And if they can kind of make it, it was 2 at Milwaukee, then it was home versus Texas, and then Cleveland, and then it was on the road against Texas and Cleveland. And that added up to 15 total games against what looked at the time, I mean, Milwaukee's in first place. Yep. Texas had been in first place.
And 15 games above 500, too. Milwaukee's up there like there.
Texas had been in first place for most of the season. And then Cleveland, while they didn't have a winning record, they haven't had a winning record since July.
Represented the biggest danger of it.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And so we said if they can make it through that 15, even going like 6-9, honestly, 7-8 certainly. And instead they went 8-7.
They were going to be in a good position. Yeah.
And it didn't necessarily look beautiful the whole time, but we saw what happened, which is you make it through that gauntlet of your last remaining difficult portion. You go 8-7. They gained ground on Cleveland during that time. They weren't able to secure the tiebreaker, which would have really been the icing on the cake, but they come out of it now 6.5 up with essentially 3 weeks to play, 3 weeks and a couple days to play. Yes, those leads have been blown before.
Absolutely.
That represents the 2%.
I was thinking about I was thinking about that yesterday. It's like we will absolutely start to panic if it gets down to 3.5, right? That lead does. Like this can happen. And there's a decent chance that it does at some point over the next 3 weeks get down to 3.5. Right?
I would say, yeah, maybe, but you got to view it kind of like I remember we talked about this in 2019, which is you can see the ebbs and flows coming with the schedule. And so, yeah, the Twins are playing like the Mets, who are not great, but should put up some fight, and then they play Tampa Bay.
That's a good team.
And meanwhile, Cleveland's in Anaheim. But we saw, I mean, I keep coming back to the same point, which I wrote about and we talked about on Wednesday, which is Cleveland's just not good. And so we keep attributing all these
7 games under 500.
Right. And so they go out to Anaheim and I go, oh, they're probably going to win 3 out of 4 in Anaheim here. And I'm watching last night and they're up 2-1 and I go, well, this is just an easy win for them. And no, I forget. They're not good. Like Class A is not Class A from last year. He's got 8 losses already or whatever. And I mean, he's still good, but it's not. We keep attributing these sort of scary characteristics to the Guardians because that's how it was last year, because that's just how Twins fans are built. Sure. And because for the last decade or so, the Guardians have been that way. Right. But it's not that way. Right. They want it to be that way, but it's the other way, to, I think, paraphrase The Wire. But and so that is really the saving grace, which is I wouldn't put it past the Twins to slump down the stretch here. I mean, they got 22 left. I wouldn't be shocked if they went 10-12. I would be a little surprised given their schedule, but even going 10-12, I think they'll win the. I mean, you said it. Yeah. The magic number 16. So what that means is combined Twins wins and Guardians losses.
Yeah, Twins could go 10-12. And Guardians could go 15-6,
right?
And the Twins would still win the division, right?
And so when you start to just the window shrinks for them, and the clock is on your side, you know, it's like a football team with a 3-point lead with 2 minutes left, but the other team doesn't have any timeouts. All you got to do is just sort of snap the ball, don't fumble it. You can even kneel down if you want. Like, just do not fumble the ball away, and you're going to win this. And that's sort of where the Twins are at. They have essentially equal odds, which is to say 1%, of not winning the division and of getting one of the 2 buys. They're both like 0.9%.
And they are not getting. I mean, there's no way that. We're not saying that to suggest that they have any chance of getting the bye. They don't have any chance. Right, yes.
I'm saying you should be sitting there and going, well, they have no shot at the bye, one of the 2 seeds.
Right, because all the teams in the AL West, there's 3 teams in the AL West, they're all about 15 games over 500, and the Twins are like 7. Right. So
but if you're sitting there correctly saying, well, there's no chance they're going to get one of the top 2 seeds in a bye, I agree with you. Apply that same standard to the exact same percentage of them not winning the AL Central, and that's kind of where we're at. Yeah. It is strange. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. It is strange to both be in the worst division, and really maybe the worst division ever. Right. It's certainly one of the worst divisions ever. It is strange to both be in the worst division ever, but then also not really have to fight for it. Do you know what I mean? Like, you would think, yeah, the division stinks, and it's allowing the Twins to potentially win it with 83 wins or something like that. But you would think, well, at least somebody's going to win 79 games in that. But Cleveland's like on pace for 74 wins or something. Yeah. And I mean, that plays a part in how bad the division is. But those are like 2 separate things. Like, it could be a horrendous division, but at least Cleveland could be 500. Yeah. But it's not even that. And so it's such a weird feeling to be like, at no point have the Twins really had to do anything other than like a light jog to win this thing. And it's just such a weird, it feels like it can't be. Do you know what I mean? Like, it feels like this can't be the case for 6 months. And it feels like, you're telling me it's not even mid-September yet and it's already basically over. And that's just what they've been handed.
On the one hand, you know, they've got this, you know, 6.5 game lead in the division, right? Feels very comfortable. We're just talking about how comfortable that feels. On the other hand, I take a look. I'm like, this team is 6 games over 500. Like, they would have no shot at the wild card right now if they were competing for the wild. If there was any other good team in the AL Central, they would have no chance at the wild card.
Right.
So, I imagine that battle in the AL West, right, where you've got 3 teams that are all within like 2.5 games of each other, or 3 games of each other, right? One of them is going to get a first round bye. One of them might miss it completely, right? And one of them is going to have to face the Rays on the road, or
they could be out,
right? Or they could be out, right? Like you almost want to, if you are.
Those are 3 very different outcomes.
Yeah. If you're one of those wild card teams, you're kind of like, I think I want to be the last wild card team as opposed to the 5th wild card team, because the better wild card team has to go face the Rays in Tampa, where by the way they've got an amazing record at home this year.
Yeah, it's a strange. I mean, we used to run into this before it was this format,
right?
And the reason the Twins played the Yankees so much is that under the old format, teams couldn't play when there were only 4 playoff teams. There were the 3 division winners and 1 wild card.
Right.
Teams could not, in the first round, could not play a team from their division, and so the Yankees and let's say the Red Sox would make the playoffs together, and once in a while they'd be matched up, but it was you couldn't; those were illegal, and so eventually, essentially, the Twins would get subbed.
A lot of times, it would appear the Yankees were gearing up for second place so they could face the Twins in the postseason as opposed to like whoever else.
Well, I mean, one of the proposals I remember of the CBA when it was being negotiated 2 off seasons ago, was what if we let the higher seated team choose their opponent like a draft?
Yeah, I actually still love that.
I love that idea, but I talked to a couple at the winter meetings, non-Twins people. We were shooting the shit, and that came up. Shooting the S, sorry. It's not a Patreon. I'm used to swearing on the Patreon. And they were like, well, that sounds great, but what that's going to do is one of the people I talked to who works in front office said he thought that you would have teams not choose. You would have teams just take the default what the actual matchup was, because they don't want to open themselves up for criticism
maybe,
or provide bulletin board material. And so what would happen is you're the number 1 seed and you get they get the bye. So you're the number 3 seed or whatever. They're the Twins, and you're like, well, who do you want to pick? They would just say, well, who were we going to get under the old format anyway? Because you don't want to go, well, we picked the Blue Jays, and then all of a sudden the Blue Jays are going, they wanted to play us.
You won't fire them up, right?
And then it opens you up to criticism because it's like, well, they chose this matchup. Like
Chris and I were talking about this the other day too. The other thing about that is that you can kind of take a look at those teams that you're facing, and sometimes based on the team that you might pick, your time of game might change. Like if you pick the Astros, you probably have a 7:00 game on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You pick Seattle, well, you probably got a late afternoon game.
Twins Blue Jays is going to be on at like 4 a.m.
Exactly right.
The day before the playoffs.
Exactly. So maybe you're choosing it based partly on, hey, we want people to show up for a 7:00 game as opposed to 11 a.m. game. Right.
So one of the things, if it is over, or even if you're somewhat skeptical and it's just mostly over, one of the things we're going to talk about is like, well, what now? Like, what is they got to take care of business. You got to go, like we said, 10-12 or better, something like that down the stretch to really hammer this thing home. But I think it's pretty likely that they'll get to a 16 magic number, within 2 weeks, certainly.
Right.
But like, what? Okay, now what? Like, what is the actionable, effect of this? And in a lot of ways for the Twins, it's get guys healthy. Experiment with some roles for the guys who are either coming back or here. We saw that Julian finally played some first base. I threw a party in my apartment for that. It only took me asking 10,000 times. And I'm mad that it happened on the road.
Yeah.
Because if it would have happened at home, post-game, I would have said to Baldelli, you finally listened to me, huh? Took you a year.
Is that what you just said?
I probably would have, actually. What happens with me when I get comfortable in situations, I just start saying stuff, which happened earlier this year. But we saw Varland work in relief.
Yeah,
they're still hoping, I think, to add Kirilloff to the roster. My guess would be tonight.
Yeah,
it sounds like so that might mean the end of Gallo, and then is Kirilloff going to play only against righties? Are they going to try to use him kind of sporadically? There's also just how much does Correa get rested down the stretch? Julian while he's playing first base, could also his legs could use some time off a little bit. Michael Taylor, they need to get back, and then there's all sorts of bullpen guys that they're trying to sort through. Varland, Paddock is rehabbing. Yep. Brock Stewart still is hoping to come back. Alcala is hoping to come back. Then they got to figure out who's going to be the third starter. And if Maeda's not the third starter, if that goes to Joe Ryan, do you start giving Maeda a couple of relief appearances down the stretch to prepare him for a postseason bullpen role? And so there's all sorts, and I'm forgetting stuff. I mean, Buxton obviously is a factor too. And so that's all the stuff that there's about 20-something days to figure that stuff out. And
while you're still trying to win the division,
while you're still trying to win the division, you want to give guys rest.
Right.
You want to, especially I think with starting pitching, if you can get Sonny Gray an extra day between starts, or Pablo Lopez an extra day between starts, if you can avoid using Duran back-to-back at any point for the rest of the season, that'd be good. Right. But then you also got to kind of audition guys for roles. Because, you have to choose a 26-man roster where you're going to have 15-plus position players probably for 13 or 14 spots. You're going to have to figure out bullpen spots and all that. But then it does you no good to literally maybe clinch a division on September, 20th, let's say. If then 2 weeks later, when the playoffs actually start, you go,
we're gassed.
We're gassed. Like the bullpen's all worn down. Lopez is hurt.
Has limped into a lot of postseasons over the. Yes. I mean, not even just this generation of Twins. They limped into postseasons underneath Mauer, Mauer and Morneau and such.
I mean, they've almost never there's been years where Mauer and Morneau were out there. Right. In 2019, Arise was hurt, Crone was hurt, Kepler was hurt. They were all banged up. Garver, I think, was banged up at that point. And then there's been a bunch of years where whatever their playoff rotation would have been was not. Right. Like Pineda gets suspended and you get Randy Dobnak starting, or Gibson gets bumped out of the rotation, or so-and-so gets hurt and you end up with Brian Dunsing starting. Right. Yes. And so there's nothing you can do to just stop that, but there are some steps you can take to minimize that risk, and I think that's going to be such a big part of what happens here. Yeah. But that can we're gonna start unpacking, I think, some of those in detail, because I think some of those moves are going to be happening as early as today. We'll see what happens later today. But before we do that, let's quick cover one of our brand new sponsors. Both Aaron and I have downloaded the app Odds Are. That's ODDSR. Odds Are. And why is it called Odds Are? Because, like us, it has to do with gambling. When we talk about odds of the Twins winning the division, that's what we're talking about. So there's a new app, and it uses AI and machine learning to suggest smart sports bets. So this is not something that you go make bets on. This is just a tool that you use to identify, right? So I went out there this morning. There's two screens. Basically, one is, here's the smart bets we think for today. And then the second screen is, here's just everything. And you can pick. You want to check on one game or something like that. I went and I found, I think it's picking Colorado. It has something to say on Colorado and the Giants today. I think on Sunday it has something about the Vikings game as one of their smart bets. And I don't think Vikings fans are going to be too happy with that. It's absolutely worth checking out, though. I would suggest checking it out, like downloading it today, because you've got a full slate of Major League Baseball games tonight. You can see how they do.
You got a full slate of Major League Baseball and college football games tomorrow. Yeah. And Sunday you got a full slate of Major League Baseball and NFL games on as well.
It's smart betting made simple. On your Odds Are, ODDSR is the name of the app, on your mobile phone. And we got a special link for you to use to get straight to the download just for Gleeman and the Geek listeners. You can download the app at oddsr.com/Gleeman, and you get 30 days for free.
That's right.
It's Odds Are, that's ODDSR. So oddsr.com/Gleeman to get 30 days free.
Yep. Also, Twins are back in town this weekend. And if you're going someplace before or after the game, I'll tell you one of the newer places. It's both an old place and a new place, because there's a new place that is Brixworth, but it used to be the old Darby's.
Yes.
And if you know that
you and I have
great
had many
patio.
A drink there.
Yes.
On the patio.
On that patio.
We've had events there.
Right.
That end there.
Yeah, that's right. We've had pub crawls that end there. You're right. But now it's Brixworth, which is both a brewery, and not only do they have pizza, they have the rectangular pizzas are ranked number 1 in Minnesota for Detroit-style pizza by the Washington Post. Like, it's that good a pizza. Also, great hazies. I know Phil Miller likes it there.
Yeah, a lot of pub food, burgers.
Right.
But yeah, they're known for the pizza.
It's just a block from Target Field, Gate 6, where the North Star line is. Just Google Bricksworth, BRICKSWORTH, and follow the signs for the great patio. Or, if you can't make it to Target Field this weekend, they've also got a great Burnsville location. You can go watch the games on TV there.
Yeah, a lot of TVs to watch sports.
Yep.
Good mix of pub food, Detroit-style pizza,
Great
beers,
beer. Yeah.
sports bar environment, and then the great patio. Because to me, this is now perfect weather season. I got about 3 weeks a year in Minnesota where I actually like the weather, and this is it. Bricksworth Beer Company in the North Loop, where the old Darby spot used to be.
Yep.
Right next.
Same family that owns Black Stack Brewing. So if you know that award-winning brewery, this is the same beer.
John has tested it.
Yeah. Oh yes.
So he lived. So that's good.
That's right.
Okay, so the Twins have, which this kind of surprised me, the 4th best record in the American League versus winning teams now.
Yeah, that doesn't. I mean, I guess that surprises me in terms of like my overall thought about the quality of this team. But consistently throughout the season, we've been like, oh, they did much better versus Houston than we thought they were going to do. They did better versus the Dodgers than we thought they were going to do. They did better than the Yankees than we thought they were going to do.
Yeah, you're right about that.
You know?
So the teams that are ahead of them are the Orioles, who have the best record in the American League.
Okay.
The Rays, who are the second best team in the most monstrous division, which that makes sense. And the Red Sox, who are also in that same division.
Really? The Red Sox?
Yes. They're like a game better than the Twins. But I guess my point there is, as we talk a lot about the remaining schedule and the Twins really, all they have left in terms of winning teams are hard opponents. Right. They have the 3 against Tampa Bay to complete this upcoming road trip, or homestand, excuse me. And then they have a 3-game series against Cincinnati. And Cincinnati's not a great team. They're sort of like the Twins.
But they're right in the NL West wild card.
And that's it.
They're a desperate team.
And so you might say, well, that's going to be a lot of crappy baseball down the stretch. That's going to be a lot of kind of, trying to get right and trying to get healthy and prepare for the playoffs against weak opponents. And can that be a negative? 2 things. One, and I mentioned this on the Patreon, is there's been many studies. People are always trying to study cause and effect and correlation for the playoffs because it is such a sort of uncrackable code of what actually wins in the playoffs. And everyone loves to say pitching, but that's not necessarily true. Right. Chrissy, being a Phillies fan, they had 9 Hall of Fame starters in the same rotation, and they didn't win. Yeah. I always point to that Detroit team that had like Verlander, Scherzer, Porcello, Anibal Sanchez, and I'm missing somebody. They got swept.
Right. I heard that one member from that team, this is the 2014 Tigers, I think, one member of that team, since then, I think they've got like 5 Cy Young Awards between them. Yeah. Right?
And they got swept.
And they got swept. They have like 5 Cy Young Awards since then. And every year since then, one member of that pitching staff has won the World Series.
Well, yeah, because Verlander and Scherzer, I mean, these are guys who have dominated in October.
It was crazy.
Yes. So, but part of that is also, it's conventional wisdom, or at least a cliche, that you want to go into the playoffs hot.
Right.
You don't want to clinch 10 days out and just, put your hangover lineup out there 8 times and go 2-6 and then try to kind of restart the engine there on game 1 of the playoffs. Except, and I've read about this for 20 years that I've been involved in baseball writing and media and stuff. And people are every couple of years there's a new study about this because people want it to be true.
Right.
And it's just
they want it to be something more than just random.
Right. And there's no correlation whatsoever between, I'm pretty sure, last 10 games or even last 20 games.
Right.
And so your record down the stretch, it matters in the sense that many playoff spots require playing well down the stretch. For instance, whoever the Twins play in the first round will have gotten the number 6 seed, the number 3 wild card out of 3.
Yep.
Almost by definition, that team will have finished with a good record in the last 10 or 20 games because that's how they secured that spot, because there was competition for that spot. But just as often, you get into a spot where it's, the Twins situation. Not as weak of a division, but you're up 6 or 7 games with 3 weeks left, and it's like, it doesn't really much matter how we play, other than we don't want to be terrible.
Right.
And so that's why I started to think, well, they're not going to play there's not going to be a whole lot more kind of measuring sticks here for the Twins. I mean, Tampa Bay you could maybe measure against.
Right.
Cincinnati, I don't really think you're going to measure against much other than, they're a decent team.
Sure.
There's nothing in the last week and a half to measure against other than, Coors Field's nice to be at, I guess, and how bad are the A's or something like that. But they did well against all their measuring sticks during the season. We just talked about how they took 5 out of 7 against Texas. You mentioned Houston and New York they fared well against in the first half.
I think they went 4-2 versus 4-3 versus.
Well, I know they had their first winning record against New York in 20 years or something like that. And so, there's not a cause and effect here, but I guess it also doesn't really matter. Ultimately that's what you're saying is that the fact that they went 4-2 versus the Yankees in April and May doesn't really matter that much about But people want things to matter. We talk a lot about how the human brain, it wants to find reasons for anything, even if there is no reason for it. You know what I mean? Right. Why did you flip that coin? Why did it land on heads? Was the wind pointing in this direction? Did you put your thumb on it when you flipped it? What was and it's like, nope, that's just how things happen. And in sports especially, we so badly, just as a human race of people who look at sports, want to find reasons and explanations and correlations and causation and all that. And sometimes you can find it if you dig enough, and sometimes it's obvious. But there's a lot of situations where people just want something so badly to be true that they almost don't care if it's not true.
Right.
And I think that's where you get with the playoffs. And that, to me, is what makes baseball so fascinating. But it's also what makes baseball so potentially frustrating.
Of course.
Which is, especially when you have an outlier event like the Twins going 0-18 in a structure that really lends itself to coin flips a lot of the time, or 60-40s a lot of the time. And so you might think to yourself, well, the Twins are built more around pitching now. That should be to their advantage. Maybe, but probably not. Or you might say, well, the Twins need to finish hot, so they go in playing well. Yeah, maybe, but not really. Or you might say, well, what's their record against good teams? That'll really tell you a lot. Well, it's pretty good. It's 4th best in the American League. They're going to spend the last 3 weeks not playing any good teams. So what's the difference? Half those games came.
Which one do you want to put more weight on?
Right. So it's a weird way of what I really have tried to focus on over the last 10 years, let's say. Because you get to a point where you write so many playoff previews, and I've written them in my life, not just about the Twins, but when I was running Baseball Prospectus for 3 years, we did a playoff preview of every game. We did a Pacoda projection for every game where I'd enter in the lineup, and you just learn the stuff you want to matter, and the stuff that matters over 6 months doesn't matter because anything can happen. And what to me ends up mattering is you want to put faith in home field. You want to put faith in health, which plays a huge factor because in our heads a lot of times, and this is true of all sports, you go, well, I know in basketball, you look at a 3-6 matchup in the NBA playoffs in the first round or whatever, and you go, well, they won 53 games and the 6th seed only won 44 games. It's like, well, if the 53-win team is missing their 2nd and 5th best player, well, who cares how many games they won? And in baseball, injuries play such a huge factor. And then the other thing that I looked at is matchups. And I don't mean matchups like you just hinted at. There's no real value to me in saying, well, they went 5-2 against Texas. Or they went 4-2 against Houston or whatever it was. That's better than the opposite if you're the Twins. But there's no predictive value in that because you look at half those games and it's like, that was won by a guy who's not even going to be on the playoff roster. Or that was
on the other hand, if they have a rotation with a bunch of good left-handed pitchers or dominant right-handed pitchers and also mediocre left-handed pitchers that they can somehow pull.
I think the stylistic aspect of matchups is much more important to me. And what that means is exactly what you said, which is the Twins want to face right-handed pitching. Because if you just look at their lineup, I mean, just think of what they have. I think I wrote this down.
When they face left-handed pitching.
They're up to 4th against right-handed pitching. They're up to 4th in the American League in OPS. You think of what they have. Well, they're about to get Kirilloff back. They got Polanco as a switch hitter. They got Kepler, who's been fantastic in the second half. They got Ed Julian and Matt Wallner, who have been great rookies. And then they even have some role players like Castro, who have done a really nice job. They want to face righties because they can stack. That's 6 guys I named right there. You add in, Carlos Correa and the catcher spot, which are going to be right-handed. And it's like that is a lineup that no right-handed pitcher is going to love facing because they got power, they draw walks. There's a lot of depth. On the other hand, against lefties, they've struggled all season. They've been one of the worst in baseball against lefties, and you can see why. They thought Buxton was going to be productive against lefties. He wasn't, and now he's just out of the picture. Yeah. They thought Miranda was going to be a cleanup type of hitter against lefties. He hasn't done anything, and now he's out of the picture. So really, you start to look at, well, what does the lineup look like against lefties? And it's like Correa,
Jeffers,
the catcher spot. Then you start to get into like Farmer and Taylor and some guys like that. And so when I say matchups, like who do they want to play in the first round? I don't care what the record of that team is. I don't care what the run differential is. I certainly don't care what the Twins season series in 3 games or 6 games or 7 games was against this team. What I want to know is what do they do well, or even just what do they do stylistically? Like we talked about Cleveland. Well, if you have a high strikeout pitching staff that gives up home runs, you're going to have to consider them in a different light if they're playing Cleveland, because Cleveland puts the ball in play and never hits home runs. And so it's kind of like our strengths for your strengths. Are we? And so when we try to, and we'll get into this as the picture, not from the Twins standpoint, but as the wild card picture starts to kind of clarify a little bit, and maybe it won't, but
it's hard to tell when we're going to really have a good idea about it. I mean, what's going to happen is one of those teams in the AL West is going to have to completely fall apart or something to clear, or
which we've sort of seen from Texas already.
Yeah, right. And the truth is that, well, like we just said, with those top 3 teams in the AL West, one's going to be in first, one's going to be in second, one's going to be in third, and the third place team could miss the postseason completely. Right. Blue Jays right now have the last spot. Right. So it's one of those 3, and it could be any of those 3 teams. We could be facing Houston here. We could be facing Seattle here.
I think the most likely here are
right now. It looks like
I would rank it in order of their most likely opponent as of what is today? Today is September 8th. As of 10 a.m. on September 8th, I would say it's Toronto, Texas, Seattle, Houston, in that order.
Is that,
the likelihood?
Is that because if you take I haven't taken a look at the playoff probabilities or the division winning probabilities in the AL West. Is Houston favored to win that division right now?
Well, if you think they're a stronger team, just like on paper, yes.
Okay, I mean, I'm just talking like they're in baseball perspectives or Fangraphs or something like that. Are they the one that is the leading one right now, or are the other teams
slightly?
Yeah,
I think I just have no faith in Texas. Now they just lost another good player, Garcia, to an injury, and I mean we saw plenty of Texas.
Scherzer came out of that game with the Twins. He
just got rocked yesterday or 2 days ago. Gave up 7 runs or something to the Astros. The Astros just swept Texas in that matchup, which is their big rivalry, obviously. Right. And so most of those teams, like I don't want anything to do with Houston. I've seen that story already.
Yes. I agree with you.
You know, I remember like as a kid in the mid-'90s, it was the Houston Rockets. Speaking of Houston, they had won the championship the year before with Akeem Olajuwon, and then they added Clyde Drexler, and they weren't that good the next year. They were like the 6th seed or the 7th seed or something like that. And I remember their coach, Rudy Tomjanovich, said his big thing was never underestimate the heart of a champion. And I remember I watched an interview on like Inside the NBA when I was a kid. I was like 13 or whatever. He was like, I guarantee nobody wants to play us in the first round. Right. No matter what you could say we're the 50th seed. Right. We could have gone 0-82. Right. If we were in the playoffs, nobody wants to play us. And they won. As the 6th seed or whatever, they won the championship. And, you know, maybe it's a stretch to consider the Astros that way. They've lost some key guys, but they've also re-added now Verlander. And re-added. But I don't want to play them. I don't want anything to do with Altuve and Bregman and Alvarez and some other guy, Tucker, and that pitching staff.
They have shown they know how to get through playoffs postseason.
That's the thing. Now, it would be fun from a narrative standpoint to have Correa against Houston, and there's some other stuff in there that's fun too.
It'd be fun to knock off the champs.
Well, that's true too. I mean, they're the literal champs. Like you shouldn't want to play them, even though they haven't been quite as strong, but they've been playing well lately. They're also number 1 starter. Well, it's probably Verlander, but Framber Valdez is a lefty who's been great, and you know is not a great matchup for the Twins, and all that stuff. So I think you should probably be rooting for Houston to continue to be hot and to take over control of that division. Then it's either going to be Seattle, Toronto.
If Houston takes over that division, I would rather Houston finishes in second. Because if Houston takes over that division, the Twins advance, they have to face Houston.
Right. My feeling on that is you're going to be happy that they're in the second round. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it. I absolutely would be thrilled if they make it to the second round. I still want them on the entire other side of the bracket.
Let's not start S-ing each other's D's here, but to quote Winston Wolfe in Pulp Fiction, or to paraphrase.
I want Seattle to win that division. I want Houston to be in second, and I want either the Rangers or Blue Jays to be the team we end up facing.
Yeah, that's like being on a first date. you haven't had a successful second date in 20 years,
Yeah.
and you're going,
Fair.
I hope the fifth date goes well here. And it's like, buddy, you got to get through dinner. Like, you got to, you know what I mean? You got to get her not to walk out in the middle of dinner here. I speak from experience there. So, yeah, this is all the stuff that is going to be kind of at play the next 3 or 4 weeks of September. And then we hope a decent sized playoff run. And we would love to have you join the Patreon and kind of ride along with us. We'll be doing 3 episodes a week, one of which will be the one you're listening to now, which is free on Fridays. Yep. But then we'll be doing Monday episodes and Wednesday episodes. And you can get them all at patreon.com/Gleeman. The couple just little things. We talked about Kirilloff.
Yeah.
That's not official or anything, but I'm just assuming he's going to come back tonight. The question then becomes, what's the roster move? I would sit here and scream into the microphone. It should be Joey Gallo.
I presume it's Joey Gallo,
but the guy's like a cockroach. He stays around. There's always some other injury. There's always some other roster, whatever, that keeps him around. I mean, we've been talking about this for literally 6 weeks.
It could be that there's another injury that they're dealing with. There's somebody they want to put on the IL that we don't know about. I mean, I suppose they could also consider, shortening their bullpen again or something like that. Going with, I don't think that's going to be the case because they are in the middle of. This isn't something where they're just. They've got a 3-game series and then they've got a day off or something like that. They've got now 13 games in a row, 14 games in a row. Like their next off day isn't for a couple weeks.
I mean, we've talked about this, but
I think
it's never become clear with a player that the front office is keeping him on the roster and the manager wants to not play him.
Right.
And I don't mean that in a way that like Baldelli and the front office are feuding over Joey Gallo. They're not. But you see it in the usage, which is, I know people are like, well, why does Rocco keep playing him? Well, because Rocco doesn't want to play with a man short for weeks at a time. He has to use bench spots, especially the way he likes to make.
He's got a left-handed batter there, and it's a right-handed pitcher.
But you see now, he didn't start any of the Cleveland games, which is a tell because those are the key games, and they were facing right-handed starting pitchers.
Right.
When Gallo has started games recently, which is sporadically and always against righties, he's batted 9th as a first baseman. Yep. He's often, even in those circumstances, been removed for a pinch hitter in the 5th, 6th inning. Basically, the first opportunity to play a matchup, they take him out and bring in someone. Sometimes they bring in like Jordan Luplow, a righty, to face a righty instead of letting Gallo, a lefty, stay in. And then he's also getting used as like a pinch runner or defensive replacement, which is hilarious given his history as a slugger. And all those things to me point to a manager saying, "This is the hand I've been dealt."
Right.
But I don't have to.
I'm going to try and put you some things where you might succeed.
Right. But I'm going to try to minimize the impact, negative or positive.
Right.
I'm going to try to spot you in a couple situations so you're playing. I'm using the roster spot. I'm kind of keeping the wheels in motion there. Right. But to me, just in general, he's a left-handed hitting corner outfielder, first baseman. Yeah. You're bringing back Kirilloff, who fits that description exactly. And Julian is now getting some reps at first base as a left-handed first base option there. So what do you even need that for? And especially now that Gallo's barely playing. But with that said, I've been wrong about Joey Gallo now for
it is possible somebody
weeks.
Else goes on the IL, but
it's always possible. Let's see.
I will be interested. I mean, the other half of that is the other half I'm more interested in, though, which is I want to see what Kirilloff can do. I agree. Now. I mean, I'm really excited to see what he's doing. I'm excited to see whether he plays first or he DHs, how much they use him in various positions, right? Because I think you playing Julian at first base, finally kind of breaking that glass a little bit and seeing what happens. I think you can just put Kirilloff at first base. You don't have to worry about Julian playing first base again for a while. Sure. But I could also see them saying, yeah, he's dealing with the shoulder thing. Maybe we don't want him, having people run through tags or have him sprawling out along first base.
That's how he got hurt.
Exactly.
Was diving for a ball.
That's what I'm saying.
And within that, along those same lines, what happens if he does get hurt over the next 3 weeks and you need a new first baseman and you have cut Joey Gallo? Playing Julian over there half the time down the stretch could really open up some things, and then all of a sudden the DH spot is open. If you want to play better defense in the outfield and you want to put Wallner at DH, you want to put Buxton at DH because now he's very much he's always a question mark. But even he was pulled off his rehab with knee soreness after playing like 1 1/3 games.
I wondered whether or not Julian might go on the IL when Gallo or when Kirilloff came back, but then the fact that he quit. he actually played first base.
Well, and he started the game at second base, which made me think, okay,
those are both good signs that he's feeling a little bit better with the hamstring.
It was funny that it took them like 3 months. I like to think my persistent nagging has played a part, but probably not. It took them like 3 months to finally be like, all right, let's see Julian at first base. First ball of the first start at first base is an errant throw that he has to leave the bag, catch, and then apply a sweep tag, and he did it pretty nicely.
Yeah,
and then he had 3 or 4 balls hit to him.
Yeah, no, I noticed that. And but before the rain delay, he had like three,
and he did fine on all of them.
Right.
He made all the plays he was supposed to make. Did he look a little awkward over there? Yeah, maybe.
He's gonna. I mean, everybody who plays first base for the first 15, 20 games of their career are going to look a little awkward there.
But I do think it opens up some things, particularly pending, like you said, Kirilloff. You want to use him at DH, or pending Kirilloff not being healthy, all that stuff. But getting Castro back is also big because Michael Taylor now is on the IL with a hamstring injury. They're hoping that's only like a 2-week thing and he'll be back.
When did he go on?
For the start of this.
For the start of this road trip. Yeah, that's right. It's probably, okay.
I mean,
we won't see him during the Mets series for sure. He's got to be there for a little.
But now you have Castro, who played center field yesterday. Right. Yeah. You have Andrew Stevenson, who was called up as a left-handed hitter with some speed. Option to play some center field because that, again, if you remove Gallo from the roster, that takes a center field option away. But I would argue that Gallo was just a center field option in the sense that they picked him and threw him out in center field. Anybody under that same logic.
I'd forgotten about Stevenson. He could be sent down for Kirilloff too.
Yeah, although
Gallo gets put back into the center field rotation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Anything's possible with this front office and 1-year contract underperformers. But and then let's see, there was one other thing. Getting Willie Castro back. I mean, Willie Castro leads all Twins hitters in win probability added, and he's like third now in WAR, just because he missed so much time. But I don't. That's not predictive. That's not to say Willie Castro is the guy you absolutely need in your lineup for game 1 of a playoff series. But his defensive flexibility has been super helpful for them, as evidenced by he didn't even play center field for most of the year, but now he's probably their starting center fielder for the next week or so at least. Right. His base stealing and base running has been essential to the Twins. I mean, it's made a huge impact. He's their first 30 steal guy in like 10 years since I think Ben Revere or something like that. And his hitting, while kind of mediocre overall, which matches his career, he's in clutch spots. He's just been phenomenal. And that doesn't mean that's going to continue. Right. But those wins, you don't have to give them back that he added. And so getting Willie Castro back in terms of in-game moves and defensive flexibility and all that, that's pretty big too. So I think all that, Kirilloff, Buxton stuff is in play. What do they do with Gallo? And then within that, how do they kind of ease Kirilloff back in? What do they do with Julian defensively? How do they use the DH spot? And then you also, Polanco could use some days off his feet always.
We know Correa could
use some days off that heel always. Yep. And so, I don't know. I mean, I think they're going to be heavily incentivized to kind of have a rotation in the lineup. Yes. And all I'm saying is, don't get freaked out if. Now you would hope that if you want
Correa for 3 days,
right? Or if Max Kepler was just out of the lineup on a random day against a right-handed pitcher, you go, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. They just want Max Kepler to be at 100% for game 1 of a playoff series. And I know that's like an easy. You can sort of attach that logic to any decision making and just sort of rule it fine under that. And I realize that, but it is kind of true because, all of a sudden now we've been building up to having to win this division. We've talked about it. And then you get to the top of that mountain or the hill, let's call it. It's not even a mountain, this division. And then you go, all of a sudden this matters not at all. You're here. Yeah. So, take a selfie at the top and let's keep going.
Right. Yeah.
And, you're going to want to kind of restock your water and you're going to want to, I don't know what people do when they climb mountains.
You don't restock your water at the top. You restock your water.
I do. There's a stream at the top. I dig in. No, I ordered.
That's not how streams work.
I ordered Dasani to be delivered to the top of the mountain from DoorDash.
Yeah, that's good.
So that's kind of where things are at. So think if you see odd decisions, by which I mean, hey, why didn't they use jacks here? They usually use jacks here.
Yes.
But did he pitch yesterday?
Right,
Has he pitched 2 out of 3? Or why isn't Kepler starting? Or why is Correa out of the lineup? Or why is Kirilloff at DH or whatever? Or how come they bumped everyone back in the rotation?
Yeah.
Think to yourself first and foremost. This is not to say those have to all be great decisions.
Sure.
But just like the baseline should be in your head. You go, is this an attempt to get to the finish line in better shape?
Right. Yeah.
And I'm going to guess.
Is this a look forward to October 3rd, 4th, and 5th?
Right.
Exactly.
That's right. Okay. So before we get anything else, let's do our last couple of sponsors.
For breakfast this morning, I had an apple, which I always have. But then sometimes, as you know, Aaron Gleeman, I like to make myself a little breakfast sandwich or something.
Yeah.
Right? You know, you've seen my amazing breakfast sandwiches I do.
I get off the elevator here and I smell it in the hallway.
I did not have time to make a breakfast sandwich today. So you know what I grabbed?
Some chomps.
I did. I grabbed some chomps. I grabbed a chomps meat stick, and I also paired it with like a one of those string cheese.
Oh, I thought you were going to say with some wine. Goes well with a nice cab.
I had a little string cheese and a chomps meat stick.
On the Merlot that really hit the spot.
That was my breakfast this morning. My breakfast sandwich this morning was chomps and a meat stick. People are going back to school right now. I know for me, September, and for Chrissy, September has always been a crazy month, as you know, the kids have all these activities, all this other stuff going on. Sometimes the kids are really busy, and we have found a great way to.
Yes, this would be a good,
nice high protein snack.
Yes,
is the Chomps meat sticks.
Yeah, it would be good if you're a kid and you open your lunch.
Oh, giddy up!
And you got one of these in there.
Yeah, you're gonna be able to trade.
It makes snacking simple. It's got no unhealthy additives, 0 sugar. Like you said, a lot of protein, low carb, allergy friendly, no filler,
keto friendly,
natural ingredients that you can feel good about. Whether you're eating it, you're giving it to your kid. They come in 9 flavors. They sent us kind of a sample pack that we both trying. There's a whole bunch of there's meat, there's beef, there's turkey, there's all kinds of stuff.
I think taco is a brand new one they're putting. We had some taco ones that were really good. Chrissy liked the taco one. Lots of 5-star reviews. They only source from farmers who raise the animals humanely and farm responsibly.
And our listeners can get 20% off their first order, plus free shipping when you go to chomps.com/Gleeman. That's CHOMPS. Chomps.com/Gleeman. You'll get 20% off your first order, and they will include free shipping. That's CHOMPS.com/Gleeman. Don't forget to use our link so that they know we sent you.
Yeah. Nice little life hack, those meat sticks. And also a hack for this weekend, going to the game, download the Game Time app. It's a simple way to be able to download tickets to the Twins game. I often use it. I will get out the gate with Chrissy. She and I have a couple tickets already, but we're meeting a friend. And, we'd like to get our friend a ticket. I'll do it on my way. I will do it literally walking to the game because I've downloaded the Game Time app and I used the promo code Gleeman to do it. And as such, your first purchase, if you do that, you also get $20 off. They specialize in sort of last minute tickets.
Hard to find tickets. And not only sporting events, but concerts and shows and stuff too. Right. So you just download the Game Time app on your phone, wherever you get your apps at the App Store. You create an account and then you use the promo code Gleeman. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account. Redeem the code Gleeman on the Game Time app for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay. All right, you meat stick. Let's talk about some other stuff. It's funny to do ads for a meat stick when we know a guy who goes by meat sauce. Could you use the meat stick to make meat sauce? You could. And then that's really...
When I was in the studio one day with Henry Winkler came in, the Fonz.
Really?
Yeah.
And I never get any cool celebrity...
They introduced him to meat sauce.
Yeah.
And he's like carbonara?
Yeah. Specifically, yeah. I always think of like a bolognese or whatever. Yeah, I mean, nothing fancy. Just we chopped up some beef and we threw it in a red sauce. Yeah, meat sauce. I don't even know that. I don't want to know. I'm sure there's some story.
Those were all. I mean, Sludge is Corey's nickname.
Yeah.
They were all made by Mike Morris.
Yeah.
Superstar made up. He was just good with nicknames. He just started calling you it, and that's what you were going to be called now for the rest of your time.
Good's an interesting descriptor. He was prolific with nicknames. I don't know, Good. It used to be Sludge and Lake I used to listen to. They were sort of the weekend guys a lot of the time. Now Henry Lake is on CCO. I see him a lot at Twins games. And Sludge is a billionaire from selling the Initials game.
That's right.
Corey Cove. And from playing poker. Corey's really the only guy in media I respect because I know he's a winning poker player.
Yeah.
I know that for a fact.
He would tell you he's not actually a winning poker player.
Okay. But he's the best poker player I know, probably. Yeah. And I respect that in a weird way, like more than anything else. Like you might say,
sure.
Well, what about Barrero? He's been number one in the ratings for 20 years. Yeah, but I could approximate that. Like I've done enough radio shows and hosted stuff where I don't really. I've not been a winning tournament poker player, and
you filled in for Barrero.
Well, right. It was hard, but it wasn't hard in the sense that the content was hard. It was hard in the sense that we were like 2 hours in, and I was like, "We got another 90 minutes of this." I tell him that all the time. I go, "This is a long show." And he goes, well, "You're telling me, like, do it for 30 years, see how you feel." I was like, "No thanks." Anyway, okay, so. The other experiment that they've clearly already put the wheels in motion with is Louie Varland in the bullpen.
As that rain delay was shaping up, I thought to myself, well, they timed this just perfectly, right?
And if there's anybody on the roster who's not going to mind pitching in dreary, early fall weather
right.
in Cleveland, it's going to be the guy from North St. Paul.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
right.
I don't care, whatever.
Right.
I'll go play long toss in a parking lot in January.
I pitched in the snow in March.
He's literally pitched in the snow. I've seen videos of him doing it. And so, we talked about this going back weeks where the Twins kind of started dropping hints of, I think once the Keuchel to the rotation got set in motion, and the obvious question from people like me at the time was, why not just go with Varland?
Right.
And their thought was, well, this way we have both, which is always a consideration from them. They always try to accumulate the most depth. But then they started pretty quickly after that started saying, well, we got other plans for Varland down the stretch, in part because they kind of want to limit his workload a little bit, but in part because of what we saw, which is they gave him one relief outing at AAA, 54 pitches. He threw 4 innings, so it ended up kind of like a start.
Right.
But that's just because he was efficient with 54 pitches. Right. And even in that, the first couple innings, I streamed it when he was, it was like a week ago, last Thursday, I want to say. First couple innings, 97, 98, 99. Right. He topped out at 100 with the fastball. He was slinging sliders in there. He was getting swings and misses. And it's easy to see, for the most part, any starting pitcher that you move to the bullpen is going to be more effective on an inning per inning basis. Sure. That's just how it works. Because you can go max effort, you can eliminate your weakest pitches, you can rely more heavily on your strongest pitches.
You don't have to worry about getting through the order 3 times.
You don't have to pace yourself physically or from a matchup and sort of game theory standpoint. And so, but some guys are much better in the bullpen. Right. Yeah. Some guys are just slightly better in the bullpen. And so I know with like Joe Ryan or Bailey Ober, they feel like, yeah, those guys will be fine out of the bullpen, but we don't think there's the potential there for a big velocity jump, or eliminating a pitch for them doesn't really do that much. Right. But with a guy like Louie Varland, who is already throwing 95 pretty consistently as a starter, which is impressive on its own. Right. He's been a velocity gain development success story for them. I talked to him.
Crazy velocity gain success story. Yeah.
Like, when he first came up this year, I was like, what were you throwing when you first got to Concordia, like 92, 93? And he was like, 92, 93? There isn't a guy in that conference who's thrown 92, 93 as a freshman ever.
Right.
He was like 88?
Right.
And he said to me, I literally only had a fastball. Right. And I go, no confidence in your breaking stuff. And he goes, no. I didn't have an off-speed pitch. Right. Like, I just threw fastballs. Right. And now you look at him, and the fastball's still the go-to pitch. He's added a cutter. He's added a changeup. He goes with a slider now. And he's 95 plus as a starter, but they were pretty confident that if you just put him in a relief role, even a multi-inning relief role, which I think it's going to be for now, and you just tell him go max effort, you're not going to face the same hitter again. You're going to face him once. You might only pitch an inning, or you might try to get 6 outs, 9 outs, whatever. The velocity just immediately jumps, and he eliminates the need to use his changeup as much. They can spot him if they would like to against more right-handed hitters. Yep. And so the problem for him has been homers.
Right.
Strikeouts have been fine. Walks have been fine. The stuff is there. He just has given up too many homers in the majors. And one way to eliminate that is better raw stuff, because 99 over the plate gets hit for a homer much less often than 95 over the plate. Eliminate
the worst pitch,
the worst pitches, and even kind of dial back, and you can go very fastball heavy if you want. If you're just throwing 99, we've seen that. And so I'm very curious with him, and this is kind of what we're talking about, experimenting down the stretch, trying different things out, trying to figure out is this guy suitable for the playoffs? What's the best role for him? How confident can we be with him? And so I think what we're going to see is first couple of times maybe. It's an interesting call from a realtor I dealt with like 5 years ago. What could that possibly be?
I don't know.
Turns out you didn't sign this. You guys got to move out. Anyway, with Varland, I'm not going to answer that. I'm like you now. I'm just taking calls during the show. That's a first. That's the first phone call I've gotten from a number I recognize in about 6 months. So that tells you how the people in my life view me. I'm going to guess it's a butt dial. Having a name that starts with AA,
yeah, that's probably
you get a lot of butt dials.
I
get. Let's hope Becky's. I get butt dials from like people I've dated, where like I don't think they'd call me if the world was ending. Do you know what I mean? Like I'll get butt and I'll be like, Anyway, you get to eat first in the elementary school line, and then 30 years later you get a butt dial from someone you went on 3 dates with 14 years ago. Or something. Anyway, with Varland, I think they're going to kind of ramp him down the same way you would ramp a guy up, which is his first relief outing at AAA was 4 innings and 54 pitches. I think what did he go 2+? 3 against Cleveland. Yep. I think they envision if it goes smoothly and he continues to maintain upper 90s and top out at 100 type of velocity and he continues to have success, I do think they envision like could he just pitch the 6th inning of game 2 of a playoff series as a just normal reliever?
1 inning.
Yeah. Or 2, I mean, could be 2, but I think more of a middle relief role or even kind of secondary setup role versus like a bulk long relief. But I think in the meantime...
I'll be interested to see because we've talked a lot about a lot of names as sort of middle relief, multi-inning guys, right? Varland is one. Maeda is another one.
Right.
And I think Keuchel could also fit into that as well.
Paddock, if healthy.
Or maybe Paddock, if he's healthy, right?
3 innings in a rehab start the other day.
I'm going to be interested to see which of those end up kind of staying in that role or wanting to they want to keep them lengthened out in case they need a 4th starting pitcher in round 2 of the playoffs postseason, right? They're going to have to keep some guys long, right? And then which of them they shorten up to help things out because they know that, they are 2+ high leverage guys in the pen, both of whom are struggling a little bit or look a little gassed.
Well, I mean, just the structure of the first round, even 3 games in 3 days, it's not going to allow you to just use Duran, Jackson, Thielbar 3 times. I mean, you can, but by that 3rd game, those guys are going to be on fumes.
I mean, the other thing that you could maybe see here in the regular season is, they go into the 7th inning with a 2-run lead, and they bring in Varland to pitch the 7th and say, why don't you now pitch the 8th and pitch the 9th because we're going to rest Jackson Duran because they're around yesterday.
You can play it by ear.
You could. I'll be interested to see how they do that these last 3 weeks when it's not you're not committing to something for 162 games right now. You're committing to it for 20 games, right? And then also. We kind of went on to just see how this works in this role, and
it's going to be so much of it with Varland because he's never done it before,
right?
With Maeda potentially because it's been 5 years since he's done it. Mm-hmm. He had success in LA doing it a lot, and then with the other guys because of injuries, you don't know what you're getting with Paddock or Brock Stewart or Alcala or any of these guys, and so it's first about just can these guys pitch on a Monday and come back and pitch on a Wednesday? Then it's about what's their stuff like what's their effectiveness like, can we trust them? And there's not that much time to build up trust at this stage. I mean, a reliever who comes back today, like if they activated Brock Stewart today, which he's not ready to be activated, he might pitch 5 times before they have to decide, is he on the playoff roster and are we going to use him in game 1 of a playoff series? And so that's sort of what we've been getting at here is these are the important things now. Yes, you got to win games because you got to actually get that X next to your name or whatever on the standings. That means you actually won it. Right. But within that, there's so many. They got bigger fish to fry. Like they got bigger things to sort out, and not that much time to do it. And you only have so much playing time, and you don't want to just punt these games. You don't want to treat it like spring training. You don't want to just go. Well, we're up 3-1 in the 6th inning. We're going to go Louie Varland to Brock Stewart to Jorge Alcala, and we're going to have Paddock close. Right. Well, I mean, yeah, you could if you literally don't care what happens in that game, but you got to kind of balance out those things. Here's one thing.
You also only have so many roster spots.
Well, that's true too, right?
Like, how many different people do we have I think we should probably just spend 5 minutes before the end of this going, like, who is on rehab assignment in St. Paul right now, and how close are they?
Right.
Because we think Paddock might be starting a rehab assignment.
No, he
there.
pitched.
Oh, did he already pitch?
Not at St. Paul. He pitched at Fort Myers.
Oh, Fort Myers. Okay,
2
good.
2/3.
All right.
2 days ago, 3 days ago.
Great.
I think he said the 22nd is what he's targeting to rejoin the Twins. Obviously,
Okay.
it can change. That was like a week ago. He said that when he was at Target Field. But there's 3 or 4 relievers. There's Kirilloff. There's Buxton. I mean, they also, by the way,
Funderburg and some other things.
Well, yeah, but he's not rehabbing.
I'm saying in terms of the roster moves that they're going to try and find.
They can find spots.
People that they're testing stuff.
I don't want to be mean to specific relievers, but there's been some relievers who have spent time, weeks at a time, in this bullpen, essentially not doing much.
Fair, right? Yeah.
Even a guy like Dylan Floro.
Right. Well, that's true too.
If you feel strongly that you want to give Chris Paddock or Brock Stewart a look, I don't think Dylan Floro is going to keep you from doing that. But then you also have just the Winder, Sands, Hedrick type of spots. I know Sands has been sent down, but anyway, the one thing about Varland I want to mention is I saw some quotes from after his debut as a reliever Wednesday, where he was asked about it, and he said, I can throw this hard. Like, if you want me to throw 100, I can throw 100. Right. But then his other interesting thing was, he made it very clear. He said, I still view myself as a starter, and I kind of wanted to talk to the Twins as I heard the rumors of this. I'm sure he's a big listener to the show. He's probably. I will guarantee that a member of the Varland family is a listener to this podcast, just from a demographic standpoint. First of all, there's a million of them. They're all in St. Paul or North St. Paul. I'll guarantee that. Hi, Varland family. You guys are great. Varland Drywalling or whatever their company name is that they do. Anyway, he kind of said, once I started hearing rumors of them wanting to push me to the bullpen late, I did want to kind of sit down with Rocco or sit down with whoever and say, is this just this season?
Right.
Do you guys no longer view me as a starter? Because he's been pretty adamant. I still think of myself as a starter. And here's the truth. With Sonny Gray and Kenta Maeda as free agents.
Right. There's room for him and
he
Paddock.
could absolutely be in the rotation on opening day. And if not opening day, certainly be sixth in line.
Right. I think they're planning on it right now.
And so he spoke about after the game Wednesday, and I thought it was interesting because he's like, I still view myself as a starter, and all I wanted to confirm was that they still view me as a starter. Right. And once they said that to me, I said, okay, well, for now, I'll do anything you want me to do. And that's what you want to hear. And Paddock said the same thing when we talked to him a week ago at Target Field, which is, I don't view what happens over the next month as having anything to do with what happens, next spring.
Right.
I do think I'm a starter. I think they view me as a starter. Same thing with Varland. But if they
it's
want
all hands on deck right now.
Right.
Yes, right.
It's like if you're football and it's like, if you want me to play special teams in the playoffs, I'll play special teams in the playoffs. And that's the exact attitude you would want. It doesn't surprise me, either of those guys, but especially with Varland, it doesn't surprise me that he would take that attitude. But I think
it also doesn't surprise me that he would be like, but
I think that's smart. I'm sure that will rub some people the wrong way, but I think that's smart.
The danger is, of course, that it goes something like
it goes too well.
Yeah, right. I mean, we've seen that before. A guy comes up, he's a starter. So, God, this guy's really a dominant eighth inning closeout guy. He just saved Game 6 in the ALDS.
We do see that a lot,
right?
Because it's like if Louie Varland pitches, 8 innings as a reliever down the stretch,
right,
and he's like flawless, and then he gets into the playoffs and they make a little playoff run, they win a series or whatever. And he's pitching the 7th inning a bunch of times, and he just looks great. He's throwing 99. Right. Slider looks good. And then you go into the offseason and you go, well, one thing we kind of know is Louie Varland can be a really good reliever.
Right.
We suspect that Louie Varland can also be a pretty good starter.
Yeah, we've seen him be a pretty good starter.
But we know he can be a really good reliever. So maybe we don't mess with this. Yeah. And so that's what he kind of wanted to clarify, which I think is smart.
I'm betting even if he has a great deal of success in the postseason, they're still going to come. They're still going to be like next year.
Yeah, because here's the thing.
You're right that it is a trap that they could fall into that nobody expects to happen, right? But I got to be thinking that it's just harder to pick up.
Yes,
pick up starters.
You can always move to the bullpen,
right?
It's never too late for that.
Right.
I mean, Glenn Perkins did it at 30. Right. After he told us he discussed it for 3 different years with the Twins, and then finally was like, "All right, let's do it." And then he was a 3-time All-Star after that. Right. But it's hard to do the opposite.
Right.
It's hard to move to the bullpen
right.
at 26, which Varland will be next year.
Right.
Spend a couple years in the bullpen and then go, all right, now I'm back to starting. It's like, well, yeah, you could maybe do. I mean, Rick Aguilera tried to do that late in his career.
Yeah.
Didn't go great.
Smoltz.
Smoltz
back and forth.
Yeah, Smoltz was a Hall of Fame starter,
right.
then blew out his elbow,
Right.
and then came back as a reliever and was an all-star closer, and then went back, I think, for 1 year to start, and he was pretty good, but they were like, well, we know you're amazing as a closer now. So, let's see, there was one other. So, yeah, I mean, I think next year's rotation, assuming they let the free agents leave, which I do think is likely.
I think so, too.
Lopez, Joe Ryan, Ober, Paddock, Varland. There's 5.
Yep.
Now, wouldn't necessarily.
I don't think that would
predict
be
that
where
will
they
be
will
the
stop.
opening day
They
5.
They will pick up somebody
Right.
in the offseason for that rotation.
But I mean, believe me, Twins rotations at the beginning of off seasons have been in much worse shape
Right.
than that. I mean,
Oh,
there
for
was
sure.
1 year where it was just Barrios.
Exactly
I remember.
right. Yeah, it was
I remember
2019.
Foley had a quote because I just started. Or no, I wasn't even on the job at that point. And I remember Falvey was like, we got some work to do with the rotation. And somebody was like, well, what's the depth chart looks like? And he goes, right now we're starting Jose 5 days out of 5. So we got to do a little bit of work because he's durable, but he's not that durable. Okay, I had one other thing that I definitely want to... we talked about rest. Speaking of the rotation, we talked more about this on the Patreon, but it's worth mentioning. On the free one, the Sonny Gray, I thought 2-year narrative came to an interesting head in this Cleveland series where
6th inning.
he's in the was it the 6th?
It was the 6th.
And Baldelli comes out
Yep.
for a chat, and you mentioned this, but it's true. As soon as you see Baldelli cross the foul line on his way from the dugout to the mound, and he's not signaling for the bullpen, that means in his mind he's trying to get talked into leaving the starter in.
I think so
because he
too.
wants
Yep.
to have a conversation,
Right.
And so he gets out to the mound with Gray, which is
If you don't want to have that conversation, you've already signaled.
Right.
right.
Exactly. Because
that's why you signal early, so you don't have to have that conversation.
Because then it's like,
right.
Sonny, I hate to tell you, I already signaled for the lefty or whatever. And so he gets out to the mound, and he has a little chat with Gray, and Gray stays in, which he's been allowed to do quite a bit this year.
Runners on the corners, 1 out, I think, at the time.
It was, again, one of those 6th
Now he's
inning.
facing 5th in the order. He's facing Jimenez. And he'd gotten through the 4. Like Calhoun, I think, was on first base.
And we've seen this from Gray, and they've given him more leeway this year. And sometimes it's worked, but a lot of times it hasn't. Right. But because of the way Gray speaks candidly about this stuff and the fact that he always wants to stay in, I want to stay in the fight, as he will say thousands of times if you let him in a row.
Yep.
There's this narrative has formed in certain circles of the world that Baldelli's giving him quick hooks and Gray hates it, and there's a sort of a feud going on there, and I don't think any of that's true. And I think if really you're giving Sonny Gray credit for something he hasn't really achieved in his career, if you consider him a workhorse, and if you consider him a guy,
he's never been that.
Right,
guy.
he's never been that with the Twins. He's never been that in general.
But
But
the reason he talks about it so much is to pump himself up to try and become something.
well,
like
and
that.
the reason he ends up talking about it so much is because he does fall apart in the 6th or the 7th inning
he
quite a bit.
is motivating himself to try and make it through 7.
Well, I just mean if he didn't fall apart in the 6th inning, no one would be asking about getting removed in the 6th inning. And so Baldelli goes out there, and then afterward, they were both, and he gets out of the jam. He gets 2 outs, he gets out of the jam, and he's very happy about that. And Baldelli's very happy about that too. That's always the part that's weird to me. It's like, you think they don't want outs from starters?
Baldelli stomping around in the dugout angry about it.
Damn, Sonny Gray pitched well. Oh, man, we might win this game. What a pain in the ass that is. And so afterward, they were both asked, like, what was that conversation like? And Baldelli said, I went out there and I said, how you feeling? And he said, I got this. Don't worry. And I said, all right, you're staying in.
Yeah.
And I think people spend so much time imagining these scenarios in their head where these guys are feuding or Baldelli's only doing what the spreadsheet told them before the game, and no matter what. Meanwhile, most of the time, it comes down to, hey, he seemed confident when I went out there and he said he wanted it, so I let him in there.
Yeah. His stuff was he's still 90, ticking, 95.
Sometimes you walk out there and you say, how you doing? And every time Sonny Gray is going to tell you, I feel good.
Right.
But you can, read his body language. You can read how his velocity's been. And so the fact that he got through it.
You can watch his catcher's reaction.
Yeah, that's you kick Vasquez under the table and be like, how's it? Yeah? Okay. I do wonder if they have like a subtle.
I do too.
As you're walking out to the mound, like, is there a thing where Jeffers like pulls his earlobe? And it's like whoever this pitcher is not to be trusted. Don't trust this. He's throwing garbage up there. Anyway, I thought it was a good difference between, even though they lost the third game, but the Sonny Gray, that was a nice little cap on what has been a year and a half narrative that I think has kind of gone off the rails in terms of how it's perceived on both sides. And this was a good example of how the Twins would like it to be and how Sonny Gray would like it to be, and the fact that they found this common ground and it actually succeeded in the biggest spot. Yep. And then the other thing that happened in Cleveland is Emilio Pagan closed out a game in what has been a house of horrors for him. Yep. And it just wasn't even a story. It was just, of course Emilio Pagan closed it out. He's been good for 3 months now.
Yep. Both of those are good lines from that game. I will give you two more. Okay. The first is the guys they picked up on waivers.
The guys Cleveland picked up on
waivers. The guys that Cleveland picked up on waivers, which looked like a defeat for the Twins like 4 or 5 days ago. One of them just absolutely got blew out. Gio was, if you were a Cleveland fan, you've got to be like, why did we start this guy? Why did we start a guy who's been bad for the last month from a division rival, and he comes in and he just lays an absolute egg in that first game. Moore ends up giving up the tying home run
to Vasquez
in game 2, and I was watching Lopez closely in game 3 in that 8th inning where he did not actually give up that run. He did put somebody on base early, and I was kind of waiting for it.
It would have been funny.
Wouldn't that have been great?
Good waiver claims, guys.
And
they lost the game.
The other point I want to bring out is they won game 2. Game 2 was a real frustrating game. Like, it was exactly the kind of game that. If they lose that, the narrative around that is they're doing what they did the whole first half of the season. They're not putting the ball in play with runner on third base and less than 2 outs, all these things that are going on. The deciding run in that game was made by a pinch runner, and that pinch runner, when Baldelli made that move, I rolled my eyes. And I rolled my eyes because we've seen Baldelli overemphasize, in my opinion, pinch running over and over since 2019. And this year, one of the narratives has been how often he is burning through his bench. And in that particular case, they replaced Vasquez with Gallo, who isn't all that fast to begin with. It's not that you're replacing
he's a slow runner.
Right. But he's not as slow as Vasquez. Don't get me wrong. right.
Vasquez is the slowest guy on the team. That's what. Right. I think that's what motivated it. It almost didn't matter who the pinch runner was.
I think you're right. I think he watched Vasquez go first to third on the Farmer double just before it, and went, I think I got to get this guy out of here in case we're trying to score something.
To score this guy from third on a sac fly, it's going to have to be a wall scraper, basically.
But by doing that, he not only uses his second to last guy on the bench, Gallo. He also uses his last guy on the bench, Jeffers, because Jeffers now has to replace Vasquez to catch, right? And I think to myself, are you really doing all this? And we're going, at the time it's a tie game, right? And when we might be going into extra innings, now we've got Gallo batting, and I'm glad to have Jeffers out there again, but now we've got no more moves that you can make and all this just to maybe, listen, if it's a deep fly ball, it doesn't matter. If it's a shallow fly ball, it doesn't matter who it is.
Or if it's just a hit.
Or if it's a hit.
Pitch.
Or a strikeout. Right. Or there's a million. This rarely makes any difference whatsoever.
I agree.
And he leaned into it time and time again, and then it's a medium level fly ball, and the throw comes home, and Gallo beats it, and I'm not sure Vasquez would not have beaten it.
I don't think he would have gone.
That's what I wondered too.
Probably.
And it ended up being one of those moves where I was absolutely like, this is way too cute by half. I can't, this is typical. I'm kind of rolling my eyes like this is the Baldelli way, and you just gotta.
But when those things work,
but when it worked, it worked, and it worked in the biggest game for the biggest run of the season.
Well, that's the thing we were talking about on Wednesday along these lines. Is like, how many times does something like that have to work,
right,
to make up for not working? Like. Does that working once in a big spot like that make up for an entire season of it not working? And in some ways, sort of.
Right.
And I mean, he
made exactly the right move at exactly the right time, and I was complete doubter about it, but he was right. I mean,
and then after that, Solano hits his what should have been a single in center.
Yeah, that's true.
And Miles Straw plays it into a quote unquote triple.
Right.
And
that's a wild pitch in the end. And then a couple walks and
and that was
breaks it open.
To me, that's the season. Like, I mean, if you can just point to a moment where the pendulum completely swung to the Twin side, the moment that Miles Straw turns around to go run after the ball that went past him, it's over. Yep. That division is over at that point. So. Let's see. I had one other thing. Oh, Well, so I've tried to say this as much as possible. I'm going to write it too later this week, but I still see a lot of people kind of speculating or asking questions or just uncertain about playoff roster eligibility.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of weird rules involved, and I get why people – and the rules have changed over the years.
Right.
And I get why there's confusion. It's not straightforward. But here's how I would think about it if you're a Twins fan. If the person was in the organization on midnight on August 31st, they can get on the playoff roster. Yeah. They can find a way to get them on the playoff roster. And we've seen that in the past. With other teams, we saw it with Kirilloff in 2020.
Right.
I know that there's 40-man roster considerations in the rules, and I know that the wording of how you would get an injury replacement onto the roster is confusing. The wording is like you have to file a petition with the league and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Do not get caught up in the language of that. Here's how it works. If you got a guy in your organization as of August 31st, before September 1st, basically, however you got them, whatever level they're at, whatever their status, if you want them on your playoff roster, you can get them on your playoff roster. You can apply for a petition. Right. Any hitter that you want on can just take the place of Nick Gordon or Jose Miranda or someone who's been on the injured list for months at a time. Right. Any pitcher can take the place of Tyler Mahle or fill in the blank with any injured pitcher. And so you need to do paperwork on that, and you technically need approval for that. But I've never seen it denied. And I think people, you're reading a document that's been prepared by labor lawyers.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Who are getting paid by the hour.
That's right.
And they want to eliminate any chance of arbitration being required or anything. But don't get caught up in the verbiage. If you got a guy in your organization, and it's not like the Twins added anybody after September 1st as of now. Right. So anybody you'd want on the play, I'm going to just put it this way.
If you want Austin Martin, you want Brooks Lee, you want somebody
anybody you want on the playoff roster. If you want Walker Jenkins on the playoff roster, they can get Walker Jenkins on the playoff roster. Now, he can't be added earlier in the sense that he can't drink beer or champagne in the clubhouse when they clinch the division. So that's a consideration.
Right, yeah, that's right.
But yeah, if there's anybody in the Twins system, injured, healthy, rookie ball, AAA, majors, and you want them on the playoff roster, don't get caught up on all this other BS. They can get them on the playoff roster.
We should, by the way, just mention Walker Jenkins is just continuing
to
kick
so
ass.
He has exactly. Right I'll read the stats. He has exactly 100 plate appearances as a professional.
Okay, is that right?
Which is a nice.
I looked up his numbers the other day. And I said he's actually we raved about how well he was doing in whatever rookie league or whatever the hell it was that he was in. He's actually doing better in low A.
So here's his totals through 100 plate appearances, which, like you said,
both leagues.
Yes, combined. So he started out in the Florida Complex League, which is the lowest level of American minor leagues, which is they play at the complex in Fort Myers, but they play in the backfields in front of no one. Okay. Then he played, I don't know how many games, a dozen games or whatever. And then they promoted him to low A, which is Fort Myers, which is literally the same place, except it's the big field stadium, where they play spring training games. And it's in front of people, and the games are at night, and there's lights.
It's A-ball.
Yes, it's actual. You feel like a professional.
Right, that's right.
So between those two, which that happened like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, between those two spots, he has exactly 100 plate appearances. He's hitting .380. He has a .430 on-base percentage and a .598 slugging percentage.
He's 18 years old.
He's 18 years old. He has 6 steals in 8 tries. He's been playing center field.
Nice.
And here's the thing that you never know.
We might need a center fielder.
Yeah. For our softball team. But here's the thing especially about high schoolers, but about anybody who's really going from amateur to pro. You can think you know where they're at from like a plate discipline, strike zone control standpoint, but I've seen so many high school guys get drafted and get talked about as pure hitters and blah, 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 and you send them to rookie ball or low A, and they get 35 strikeouts and 2 walks, and you go, uh-oh, this guy can't control the strike zone. And even guys who are great at it in college, like Aaron Sabato, let's say, who walked a ton, didn't strike out that much, you send him to actual pro competition, and all of a sudden he strikes out 150 times and he walks 60 times or whatever. And that's fine, but particularly for a guy like Jenkins, who is 18, has been playing high school ball in North Carolina against kids that are scared shitless to face him because he's been a superstar for his whole life.
Yeah.
He's not getting anything to hit, and when he does get something to hit, he just knocks the crap out of it. There's no consideration of, was he swinging at sliders or is he not? But then you put him into a pro competition, and especially now that he's at low A, there are guys who can hit the corners. There are guys who can throw breaking balls.
At low A, he is 3 years younger than the average competition.
Yes.
The average age at low A is 21.
And so here's what's especially encouraging. He's got 8 walks in 100 plate appearances. I will say what I used to say about Ichiro, which is that's not a lot of walks. You'd like to see a guy walk 10 to 12 times in 100 plate appearances. He's hitting 380, so he doesn't care about walking because he can just hit 380.
Right.
But here's the real encouraging part. 9 strikeouts in 100 plate appearances for an 18-year-old in his first professional competition who's been promoted aggressively now and, like you said, is facing 21, 22-year-olds pretty consistently. He has 1 strikeout since moving up to low A, and that's the real... That's everything. Because it's like this guy has bat-to-ball skills. He can clearly drive the ball. He's got all the physical tools in the world. And, yes, will the real test be high A, double A, where guys are throwing change-ups and guys are throwing good curveballs and all that stuff? Right. Absolutely. I'm not saying this guarantees him for life as good strike zone control. Right. But it is... there was the lemon test that I talked about where you just need to see him play a dozen games and make sure he doesn't go 1 for 50.
Right.
And he's clearly past that. And then part of that is also just what does his actual approach at the plate look like? Right. Well, his approach at the plate looks like see ball, hit ball. And when I swing, I'm putting it in play hard. Right. And I'm drawing a few walks, probably because people are a little bit scared of him also. And he's just so rarely swinging and missing. And that's a tremendous sign because that is the one thing that you can't really tell from high school competition because he's not getting into deep counts in high school competition. And there might be one guy on each team he faces who can even really, put him in danger in that regard. So
do you know when the Cedar Rapids starts their playoffs?
Yeah, it's soon.
Pretty soon. And they're at top of their division.
He could get bumped up. I mean, that would be pretty aggressive.
They did it with Brooks Lee last year.
Well, yeah, Brooks Lee was 22 and had 3 years of college.
Agreed, right.
So, yeah, that extraordinarily – I mean, you couldn't have a more encouraging start for an 18-year-old.
It's crazy.
Top 5 pick. So that's good. Let me just add one other well, this sort of goes along with that. We can finish on this, I guess. We've talked about the lineup and how much better it's been in the second half. It's first or second in runs scored after being so bad so often in the first half, and how it's mostly been the 3 rookies, Lewis, Julian, Wallner, and then the 2 longest tenured guys, Polanco and Kepler, stepping up. Yep. You've also got big contributions from Jeffers, who's closer to a rookie than a veteran. And then now you're hoping to get big contributions from Kirilloff here still, who's also 26, just like Jeffers. And then I started just thinking, well, we just named 3 rookies and 2 26-year-olds who aren't going anywhere for a while. Yep. And Polanco and Kepler are the longest tenured guys on the team, but they're still under team control for next year. Yep. You have Buxton and Correa, obviously, under team control for 5 more years. Right. You're hoping at least one of them gets back to where they were. Correa seems more likely at this stage. But then I just thought it's getting to be real easy compared to like May. Think of how we were talking about this lineup in May.
Yep.
Where it was like...
Well, what we were saying in May is, don't forget, the lineup we see now is not the lineup we're going to see end of September. It's possible it'll be very, very different.
Or annoying people like me were saying, why don't they call Wallner? Why don't they? Royce is a completely different story than everything else because he had the injury. But it's becoming very easy to start kind of dreaming on future lineups for the Twins that not only could be pretty good, but could be really good and built around guys who are going to be there for a while.
Yep.
And then if you start to get Correa back, if he's healthy, with the foot, and who knows what you're getting from Buxton, you add those guys back into the mix. I mean, this has a chance to be an excellent, very deep lineup built around young guys with a couple of key veterans. And, obviously Lewis's emergence has changed the whole view of that. Right. I mean, he's just going to be a guy for you now for 5 more, 6 more years. Yep. I think Wallner you can just safely pencil in as a slugging corner outfielder at this point. Julian, certainly to me, seems like their leadoff man until he doesn't want to be their leadoff man. And then, Walker Jenkins is a little far afield. Obviously, he's probably 3 years away, even if things go well. But
you got Brooks
they
Lee
got
sitting
Brooks
up.
Lee sitting at AAA, and they got Austin Martin, who's been great over the last month and a half or so, hitting for power, drawing walks, stealing bases, playing center field, and you start to kind of add that up, and then they have Emmanuel Rodriguez, who's at high A.
I've forgotten about
this
him.
time next year, we could be talking about him being at AAA, basically. And then I don't want to completely dismiss guys like Miranda or Larnach, who 6 months ago we were pretty high on them.
Yeah.
And
I think we're absolutely. I think Miranda's due for a big bounce back next year. I'm concerned that this shoulder thing is what kind of torpedoed his year a little bit, right?
And so you add all that together. Kirilloff and Jeffers, Julian, Wallner, Royce Lewis, Correa and Buxton. You still have Kepler and Polanco.
Yep.
You start to mix in Brooks Lee and Austin Martin at some point next year. Maybe Emmanuel Rodriguez, if not next year, then certainly in 2025. Maybe you get Miranda and or Larnach back into the mix.
Right.
And that has the potential to be an excellent, deep, some walk-drawn ability, some power, some average. There's a lot of defensive flexibility, especially once you start adding guys like Brooks Lee and Austin Martin to the mix who can play good defense at multiple positions. And so it is amazing the transformation we've seen in season from, May and June to now August and September. The lineup looks completely different. It's unrecognizable.
Yep.
But then you even start to go, well, what if we kind of start to extrapolate from this current group and you start to add a couple of more pieces and maybe you get Correa back to where he was. And this has a chance to be just a phenomenal lineup. And then we're at the point where you're going, can they build enough pitching?
Right.
And, that's been the question for the whole time.
But we're already seeing and mentioned, we've got a rotation that we've already kind of...
Sort of, but I mean, that's not a great rotation.
It's
a rotation.
Yeah.
And part of that, though, especially
Lopez, Ryan, and Ober are pretty good 1, 2, 3 at the top of that rotation.
Yeah, although what is Ober right now?
Well, we'll be back on Monday with probably a recap of the Mets series, right? We'll also be keeping an eye on Cleveland and playing the Angels this week. It'll also be a lead into the last tough series of the season, which is the Rays coming to town for a 3-game set. And then we'll probably be back Wednesday. I'm guessing Wednesday we do a mailbag.
Bailey Ober
Patreon
mailbag.
Bailey Ober.
All your Bailey Ober questions.
All your Bailey Ober questions done. We want to thank Game Time, and we want to thank Chomps, new Chomps Meat Sticks. Thank Odds Are. Download that app and check out the games this weekend. And Bricksworth Beer Company. I might see you there at some point this weekend.
And subscribe to the Patreon for Monday and Wednesday show. Yep. Wednesday, like you said, might be a mailbag. Once you subscribe, you get access to an email address where you can just send in direct emails.
We do our best to try and handle most of the questions.
It's difficult because we get a lot of questions, and also, I like to block out 40 to 45 minutes for a dumb discussion that neither of us want to be in. So that takes part of the show that we can't really get to questions about. But okay, it's over. Just like the show.
Bye-bye.
Gleeman